Welcome to the Bottle Poppin' Podcast, where Meg and Heather share their love for oils, friendship, and entrepreneurship. Let's get it poppin'.
Hey everyone, this is Meg.
Hi there, this is Heather.
And we are the Bottle Poppin' Podcast. So Heather, what are we popping open today?
We are popping open a bottle of Helichrysum.
Yes. So first impression?
Floral.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet, but not too sweet. Muted sweet, if I had to use.
I like that. Yeah, muted sweet makes sense.
It's not, some sweet is nauseating sweet, right? It's definitely not what I get from this at all. It just smells like a flower, a nice flower, without being the typical flowers that you think of, roses, geranium, stuff like that. It doesn't smell anything like those at all.
Agree. So, it almost smells like wildflowers, like a field of wildflowers.
Okay, that's a good description, because it feels like it also smells just like nature in the wild. So it's not
kind of
flowers.
earthy.
Yeah, earthy. Thank you. Goodness, that was hard to come up with.
We got there eventually.
I like the scent of it.
Me too.
I can't say that it's one that I grab for the scent by any means. We'll talk about all the ways we use it here in a second. But it's not one, I don't think I've ever put it in a diffuser blend, and I've never grabbed it simply for the scent. Oh, interesting. So I'm looking at their aromatic description on doTERRA's site, and they use the words herbaceous, honey, hay.
Oh, okay. Yes, definitely the honey and the hay.
Yes, that's what it smells like.
Yeah, so that's 100% what it smells like.
So it turns out there's people that are better at describing oils than we are.
This is why our podcast is free. We're not getting paid the big money for it. But we try. I will say, I also have never used this just for the scent or diffused it, but not because I don't like the smell, but because this is an expensive oil. So just know that. In fact, both Heather and I right now are smelling out of the pure oil bottle, but they make this in a diluted form. So it's in a roller bottle, and that one's a lot more affordable. They just started selling that, I think, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And it's been nice to have the option of the more affordable, but still to have the pure oil as well.
So just getting right into it, our number one use has been on cuts for this. Yep. And so previously I only had the diluted roller, and I don't obviously want to roll that right over a cut. So it required me to have to put it on a finger and then put it over the area. And I don't feel like it was as effective as I wanted it to be, because it was this reapplication using multiple fingers. So I'm not like touching something that's bloody, stuff like that. Since we've gotten the undiluted one, it has made the job much, much quicker, because I can simply just put a few drops directly on the area, and it has worked very quickly.
Yeah. So just to give people a concept of what Heather's talking about, when I first was introduced to Helichrysum, I was told that this was considered liquid Band-Aids. And so literally, as soon as there's blood, you can take this and drop it on. And it's pretty cool to see how it stops the bleeding right away. So right before we hit record, I was telling Heather a story. A few years ago, I was cooking something, and I used our food processor. And so when I was cleaning the food processor in the sudsy water, I did not really pay attention, and I cut my hand pretty badly on the blade of the food processor. And I screamed or yelped or something, but my husband came running and he's like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And I was like, "I cut myself." And he said, "Do you need stitches?" And I was like, "No, don't need stitches. Get the Helichrysum." And so I was in pain, but I was also so excited to watch the science experiment on my hand as we dropped it on. So yeah, not that I would go out and cut myself on purpose to see this, but when you do cut yourself, it's pretty amazing to watch the process of just a gash, blood coming out. You put a few drops of this on, and the blood slows down significantly pretty quickly.
We have had similar but different. My husband was cutting the dog's nails, and he cut one of them too close to the quick, and the quick will start bleeding very quickly.
Yep.
And so at first we tried gauze compression, and it just kept bleeding through. And then we applied a bunch of gauze and tried to wrap it on really well. It just kept bleeding through. And finally I was like, I'm going to try the Helichrysum on him because it's worked on us before. And so we had him lay down, and I was like, it doesn't sting when I've done it to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and just drop it undiluted directly onto him, and did so. And it within seconds stopped bleeding. And that thing had been bleeding through for a while at that point. And we could not get it stopped. And literally 2 drops of this and it stopped. Like it would bubble up a little bit right at the surface right there. Like you could tell like it was still kind of moving through his body. The blood was moving through his body, but it was not just coming out like pouring it had been. Yeah, prior to. I opted out of the words pouring out because I'm trying to keep this podcast from being graphic. But since you went there, we went there.
Sorry. Or we have to put like a PG rating on this one.
Gushing was the other word I was avoiding, but there you go.
Well, this also works really well for bruises. So really, my first experience with it, because thankfully I don't cut myself that often, I had a really bad bruise. So our first year of marriage, I fell down steps carrying a sewing machine, and I didn't break the sewing machine or even drop it, but I did hit my arm really hard in the process. And so I had this bruise that was basically there for 3 or 4 years. And I had read somewhere, or somebody told me that like the older we get, we can have bruises that will just last the rest of our life. And so I just thought, oh, this is a bruise that I'm going to have last the rest of my life. And it was a big bruise. But I had a massage therapist who happened to use essential oil say, have you ever considered putting Helichrysum on it? And I was like, no, tell me more. How does that work? And so she recommended creating a roller bottle. And this was before doTERRA sold the roller bottle. And so I did probably 20 drops of Helichrysum and then the rest fractionated coconut oil. And I started applying it every night before bed. And I would say it probably took a month or 2 of applying it, but it was just once a day applying it. And again, this bruise had been there for years, but the bruise totally went away. And so that was kind of amazing too, just to see how quickly in the grand scheme of things, this bruise went away when I just assumed that I was going to have this bruise the rest of my life and have to explain to people over and over again, no, it's not fresh, but it was very noticeable, so yeah, that was cool.
This was actually for that reason, the bruising. This was one that I carried with me in my purse for a long time because I've got active kids and they were always falling down and hurting themselves. And so whether it was a scratch or something that was bleeding or whether it was a bruise, I was able to kind of pull the roller out right away and just make a big circle around it and then pat it around it, and it subsided. And their bruises never lasted long either for that reason too. So I really like Helichrysum, and I'm so glad to just have it in stock because I feel like it is one that when I need it, I have used it and it works super quick.
Yep, totally agree. So I've also used this one, and I don't know, this is kind of in certain books, but I don't know that I read this in a book. I don't know if this is more intuitive, but at one point I started using it for earaches, and it really works well for that as well. So just rolling it behind your ear, like as soon as you feel one coming on. I also have a friend who, whenever she flies, like her ears won't pop. And then she feels miserable the whole flight. And so I recommend this for her. And she now uses it behind her ears when she flies and doesn't have that issue. So I don't know what it does with the ear canal, but it definitely helps with that as well.
That's cool. That's really useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this can be used all 3 ways, by the way. Yeah. I have never used it internally, but you can use it internally. It has lots of anti-aging properties. So I guess you could go that direction with that too. I was going to go the emotional direction because I really like what it had to say in the Essential Emotions book. So it talks about that it's also an amazing healer of emotional pain. And it says, Helichrysum can teach individuals to have gratitude for their trials. It helps them to see that if they had not been wounded, that they would not have sought healing that resulted in their spiritual rebirth. Just as the phoenix dies and rises from its ashes, so might one be raised from turmoil. Helichrysum lends its warrior spirit so that all may face adversities with courage and determination. It brings hope to the most discouraged of souls and life to those in need of rebirth.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think a lot of us need that.
Yeah. So maybe that scent is good. We've talked before about grabbing an oil and not realizing why we need it emotionally at the time. And then when we look up the reason, it makes total sense. So maybe this is one that somebody could use. They intuitively grab this off the shelf and want to smell it, and there may be something like this happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
That's all I got.
Okay. I don't think I have anything else on this one either, other than just this is a really good oil to have on hand, either the diluted version or the pure version. And I will say as well, this is an oil that I feel like most people get the pure version with their point value. So every time you place an order, if you're a doTERRA member, you're getting points back. If you have the loyalty rewards program, which is just your monthly wellness box that you can edit and change, you get even more points back. I personally get 30% back on every order that I place. It really adds up. And so this is a good one to use your points for. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. If you enjoyed this, and if you think this would be helpful for anybody else, please share this episode and just our podcast in general with your friends and family. And also just a reminder, every third Thursday of the month, we do an Ask Us Anything call, and we would love to have you join us. It's just 30 minutes, 7 p.m. Central Time, and you can register for these Ask Us Anything calls at bottlepoppinpodcast.com or on any of our social media. So we'd love to connect with you in that as well and answer any of your oily questions. So thanks for taking the time to listen.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information, you can follow these bottle poppin' ladies at bottlepoppinpodcast.com. Tune in next week to learn about what bottle we're poppin'. Until next time, take care. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This podcast is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease.